Planning regulations and building costs make it difficult for building designers to really get their creative juices flowing, but the people in today's video have managed to get past the rules and regulations with bizarre shapes and unusual building materials. Join me as we take a look at 15 houses with strange designs. Number 15. Toilet House, South Korea. There are certain rooms you'd expect someone to incorporate into the design of their house, such as somewhere to sleep, somewhere to cook food, and somewhere to relieve yourself. But Sim Jae-duk, the former mayor of the city of Suwon in South Korea, actually built a house entirely designed to look like a toilet. Known locally as Mr. Toilet, his fascination with the porcelain thrones apparently began because he was born in one, and while he was mayor, he led a campaign to clean up all of the public conveniences. After founding the World Toilet Association, he decided in 2007 to demolish his rather ordinary home and enlisted the help of architect Goji Wong to help him design a new structure that looks like a toilet. He named it Haewoojae, which translates to mean a house to satisfy anxiety, which is what restrooms are called in Korean temples, and he lived in it for the remaining years of his life. After he died, the building was turned into a toilet museum, which features the largest toilet sculpture in the country, and now has 2 floors dedicated to exhibitions showing how important toilets are to society, as well as art pieces throughout the grounds, like the giant golden monument to poop that's the most popular photo opportunity of everything there is to see there. Number 14. Carrot House, Poland. When choosing a house to live in, we all have to decide what features are most important to us, and usually you would expect that to live in or near a city, you'd probably have to sacrifice on certain aspects of quality of life or the amount of interior space. This has been taken to the absolute extreme in the capital city of Poland, Warsaw, where you can see what's believed to be the narrowest house in the world. The city itself is full of architecture from different periods, and space is at an absolute premium. The Carrot House was built between 2 existing structures and was originally proposed by architect Jakub Szczesny as a concept during an architectural festival in 2009. It garnered such attention, though, that it was built for real, and it's just 4 feet or 1.2 meters at its widest point. Inside, there's just about enough room for a bed and very little else. And rather than being a full-time home for someone, it's instead given to traveling writers and artists who are looking for the opportunity to live and breathe life in the center of the city. The claustrophobic feel, however, means that very few people are comfortable enough to spend more than just a few days there at a time. Number 13. Le Palais Boulle, Théoule-sur-Mer, France. Located on the hillside in the small commune of Théoule-sur-Mer, which is near Cannes in France, you'll find one of the strangest homes anywhere in the world. Known as Le Palais Boulle, which translates to mean the Bubble Palace, it was built between 1975 and 1989 for Pierre Bernard, a renowned French industrialist. Offering 13,000 square feet of space, it was designed by architect Antti Lovag, who is famous for hating straight lines because he sees them as an aggression against nature. The huge estate has a reception hall, a panoramic lounge, a 500-seat amphitheater, 29 rooms, 11 bathrooms, and 10 bedrooms, along with a number of swimming pools, artificial waterfalls, and extensively landscaped gardens. There is hardly a straight line in sight, with curved bubble structures used instead, and it certainly makes it a unique place. Recent innovations have seen the interiors brought up to modern standards, but if you ever want to own a place like this, you'll need a healthy bank account. It was listed for sale in 2017 for 350 million euros, which is the equivalent to approximately $390 million, and it's also available to hire for a more reasonable rate of $33,000 per day. Number 12. NA House, Tokyo, Japan. There are a number of things that homes provide to us to become a safe refuge from the world outside, and one of the main elements that most of us rely on is the privacy that they afford. Well, that's not the case for one home in Tokyo. Called House NA, the 914 square foot house was designed for a young couple who wanted something wildly different to what their neighbor had, and the architects have certainly fulfilled that brief. Said to be based on the concept of living inside a tree, the interior space is made up of 21 individual floor plates, each of which are positioned at different heights, like the branches of a tree, and are designed to allow the owners to live like nomads within their own home. The house therefore feels like one large room, but a number of smaller ones at the same time. with each part accessible by a series of ladders and movable steps. A few curtains were fitted to give a sense of privacy on one level, but there's no doubt that this design is probably too far radical for most people to feel comfortable living in. Number 11. Mushroom House, New York. Found in the woodlands on the outskirts of the town of Parenton in New York is the Mushroom House. It's an unusual home that in recent years has become one of the most famous properties in the area because of its appearance. It was built in the early 1970s for a couple who were interested in living as a part of nature and didn't want a traditionally designed home, and is made up of a series of structures that are brown in color, supposedly after parts of the Queen Anne's lace flower, but much more reminiscent of the shades of locally grown mushrooms. There are 4 pods, each weighing around 80 tons, that are positioned on top of reinforced concrete stems that are between 14 and 20 feet in height, and those are connected to further pods that are at the base on ground level. With windows providing a panoramic view of the surrounding area, there are 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and surprisingly, there's a total of 4,100 square feet of interior living space. Having sold in 2012 for $800,000, it's certainly proof that there's a lot of interest from buyers for properties that are unique and full of character. Number 10. Casa de Pedra, Sao Paulo, Brazil. The Casa de Pedra, which translates to mean the stone house, is one of the more unusual structures that can be seen in Paraisópolis, which is the second largest favela of Sao Paulo in Brazil. It was created by Estevão Silva da Conceição, an architect who's become known as the Brazilian Gaudi and took more than 30 years to complete. Beginning with a wooden structure, he originally planned on planting a rose garden on the property's exterior, but soon became obsessed with the interior decoration. He laid concrete mortar over a wire frame and then began adding thousands of locally found objects upon which he was able to hang flowers and plants. As well as colorful and unusual shaped stones, other salvaged objects incorporated into the design include phones, security cameras, dolls' heads, bottle caps, broken tiles, and ceramics, and even other plastic jewels, watches, clocks, and glass beads, all of which were either found in the trash or from local market stalls. The building itself was built on a piece of land that measures just 807 square feet, but reaches a height of 26 feet, with the upper levels accessible by aluminum ladders, similar to those that you'd find in swimming pools. Number 9. Falling Water, Mills Run, Pennsylvania. One of the most stunning but unusual houses in the whole of the United States is hidden deep within the Laurel Highlands of Pennsylvania. Around 70 miles to the south of Pittsburgh is Falling Water, which has been partly built over a waterfall in Mill Run in Fayette County. Designed in 1939 by architect Frank Lloyd Wright, it was built for a couple as their weekend country retreat and has been described as being Wright's most beautiful work. Featuring elements that make it fit almost seamlessly within its surroundings, there's a strong influence of Japanese architecture throughout, particularly in the way the interior and exterior spaces flow into one another. Most of the materials used to build it were locally sourced, such as the huge boulders used to build the fireplace. And it was even built around a natural spring that drips water inside, which is then channeled back outdoors. The rooms themselves are purposefully small, particularly the bedrooms, which was a concerted choice to encourage them to not only be used for their intended purpose, but to encourage residents to go outside at every opportunity. After originally being a private residence, Falling Water has been regarded as such an important structure that it's since been deeded to public ownership, and there are now parts dedicated as museums to Wright's architecture, which welcome as many as 160,000 visitors a year. Number 8. Upside Down House, Trassenheide, Germany. While the designs of houses vary from place to place, there are certain features that you'd normally expect to be similar, namely the position of the doors and the roof. But there are a number of buildings around the world that have purposefully done things drastically different, and instead been built in a way that's seemingly upside down. One of the most famous of these is the Upside Down House in Trassenheide, Germany, which was originally built in 2008 on designs by a team of Polish architects. As part of a project called The World Upside Down, the intent was to give visitors a different perspective on what they would usually take for granted. Everything in the house is upside down, apart from one element, the stairs that lead to the attic, which serve as the ground floor entrance. You see this at first from the outside, where you'll spot the bench, wheelbarrow, and a bicycle that have been fixed upside down. But this continues onto the inside too, with all the furniture ominously hanging above your head. In a further twist that makes it an even stranger place to visit, it's actually slanted at a 6% incline that makes it seem as if it's been dropped by a tornado and found a resting spot on its roof. Something that really makes your brain struggle to understand your surroundings once you set foot within. Number 7. Boeing 727-200 House, Hillsboro, Oregon. Passenger aircraft are designed to transport hundreds of people across vast distances, but have you ever wondered while sat inside one whether there'd be enough space in the fuselage to actually live in there? That's what pilot and entrepreneur Bruce Campbell found himself contemplating, and when he saw a decommissioned Boeing 727 for sale in 1999 for $100,000, he couldn't resist the opportunity to find out. He repositioned the plane to a plot in the woodlands of Hillsboro, Oregon, and began renovating the cabin, essentially using the already present design. The bathrooms are the original aircraft ones, the kitchen is where the cabin crew would have prepared meals for passengers, and the chairs have all been removed to offer a huge open-plan room. The cockpit still has all the equipment in it when it flew, and while it's not exactly the most luxurious place to live, it's certainly an unusual house that very few people around the world can claim to have anything similar to. While Campbell himself spends a lot of time there, he also wants to encourage visitors to see just what's possible when you're creative, and if you want the chance to see what it's like to sleep there, it's available to rent during certain times of the year. Number 6. The Smith Mansion, Cody, Wyoming. As you look across the picturesque Wapiti Valley near Cody, Wyoming, it's not hard to see the truly bizarre Smith Mansion, which looks far more like a haphazard mining structure than something that was intended to be a house. It was built by engineer Lee Smith, who salvaged logs and wood from the surrounding area, and at first built something resembling a traditional log cabin. Extending the building became an obsession for him, though, with the aim of building the perfect family home for himself, his wife, and his child. And he started adding extra floors, ill-fitting balconies, and further elements all from wood he gathered in his pickup truck. Unfortunately for him, his wife didn't enjoy the project as much as he did and eventually left him. But this just spurred Smith on more. He kept adding more to the house by installing winding staircases and terraces on the higher floors that gave stunning views out across the valley. The story ended tragically for Smith, who died when he fell from one of the upper balconies while trying to attach a plank of wood. And for years after, it remained empty. And it's possible it may one day reopen for curious visitors to see just how ornate and strange it is for themselves. Number 5. Melnikov's House, Moscow, Russia. The rise of Lenin's rule in Russia meant that by 1929, private ownership of homes was expressly forbidden, as was the idea of any type of architecture beyond the mundane or homogeneous. This didn't stop architects from trying to find ways around the rules, though, and while most buildings from this time lack any sort of features, there's one that completely bucked those trends. Known as Melnikov's House and found in Moscow, it was designed by architect Konstantin Melnikov, who managed to convince the authorities that it was an experiment in economizing space and materials and could serve as a blueprint for future homes. No further ones like it were ever built, but he and his family were for a time allowed to live in it. It's a great example of avant-garde design, and unlike anything you'll see anywhere else, it's made up of 2 intersecting circles. This means that the interior needed few internal walls, and so they didn't need as many materials to build it, and the honeycomb structure design also meant that bricks were only needed around the window frames that had a hexagonal design to let plenty of light in. And around a decade later, Melnikov's right to practice architecture was revoked, mainly because of this house. But despite any attempts to knock it down, he was able to remain living there, garnering special treatment because he was also the person responsible for designing Lenin's mausoleum. Number 4. Luna Park, New Jersey. Located within the Sandyston Township in New Jersey, this brightly colored building is called Luna Park, and it's the private residence and occasional museum that was designed, built, and owned by artist Richard Boscarino. There's actually an 8.5-acre plot of land that's covered with unusual structures and sculptures, most of which have vivid colors, unusual shapes and designs, and are made from a variety of different materials. The centerpiece, though, is the house itself, which has 5,000 square feet of interior space. Said to resemble work by famed Spanish architect Antonio Gaudí with its clear modern alternative style. It was first built in 1989, and while the outside may look strange enough, things can take an even more unexpected turn when you go inside. It's there that Bascarino displays many of his personal works of art, with a wide collection of oil paintings, but also the curiosities that he has collected over his life, with rare pieces like the Tibetan yak leather pouches and truly strange objects such as, most famously, fallopian tubes suspended in liquid in a glass jar. While it's clearly a place designed to welcome visitors, Bascarino spends the vast majority of his time creating new elements for the park and trying to push the boundaries even further. It's open to the public for 6 days a year to give guests a true insight into the mind of this creative artist. Number 3. Krzywy Domek, Poland. When you buy a house, it's commonplace to hire a surveyor to ensure the foundations and structure is sound. After all, the last thing you'd want is for the walls to start shifting on soft ground to leave you with a wonky home. There is a place in the city of Sopot in Poland, though, where the whole intent was that it would look unlike anything else. It's called Krzywy Domek, which means the crooked house, and was developed and built by a Polish architectural company in 2004. The inspiration for its design came from a Polish fairy tale that spoke of a house that was constantly moving, and there's no doubt that the finished structure looks like it's anything but stable. It's a large building too, with around 43,000 square feet of space, and despite originally being planned to be an actual private space for a family, it soon became too renowned a place for it to be a reality. Instead, it's now part of a shopping mall with stores, restaurants, and its own radio station. But there are now plans to replicate the design in a rural location on the outskirts of the city, where the new version will become a residence as first intended. Number 2. Futuropod, Espoo, Finland. Architects have for a long time attempted to envisage what the homes of the future will be like, with new materials and restrictions to take into account. But perhaps the most unusual that were ever built were the Futuropods that were designed by Finnish architect Matti Soronen. Around 100 of them were actually completed in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and most of them are still around today, with some still being used as private homes. They're made from a blend of fiberglass reinforced polyester plastic, along with polyester polyurethane and acrylic, and each of the UFO-inspired Futuropods is 13 feet high and 26 feet in diameter. Featuring an inbuilt heating system, the pods were ideal to comfortably live in varying temperatures, but despite having ones installed across Finland and as far afield as New Zealand, the company was forced to stop making them because of the public outcry against their overall aesthetic and the subsequent lack of demand. Despite their unusual design, there are definitely elements of the Futuros that were well ahead of their time and are being incorporated into current designs for the future. The modular way of constructing them, as well as the exploration of materials other than traditional bricks and mortar, are now popular concepts, but neighborhoods are still not ready for something that looks so otherworldly. Number 1. Beer Can House, Houston, Texas. Houses around the world are generally made of similar materials, such as bricks, cement, mud, sheets of metal, and sometimes even plastic. But that doesn't mean other components aren't just as effective. With communities now producing more garbage than ever before, it's possible that what would normally be seen as junk could be repurposed to build new homes, and one of the more unusual and outlandish examples of this can be found in Houston, Texas. The man who built it, John Milkovich, was an avid beer drinker and would, according to his family, drink at least 6 cans a day. When he retired in the 1960s, he realized just how much waste this was producing and decided that instead of throwing the cans away, he'd use them to renovate and rebuild his house. The Beer Can House, as it's now known, became an 18-year obsession for Milkovich, during which time he covered his house, fence, and tree with more than 50,000 cans, as well as bottle caps, bottles, and other beer-related items. He began the process by covering the house and his yard with concrete after becoming tired of having to mow the lawn, and this became the perfect foundation to add the cans and objects. He made sculptures too, like windmills and wind chimes, and also made fences and gates for them as well. It of course stands out amongst all the other homes of the neighborhood and has become a local visitor attraction despite still being used as a private residence. And while most people wouldn't want to live in a place like this, it certainly serves as a reminder of how trash always has the potential for being repurposed without needing to be sent to a landfill. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.